Hello there, I am H.J. Cronin, author of fantasy, horror and crime, and I am bringing you the facts of fantasy. You can find my books on Amazon, and I am currently writing another fantasy book at the moment. Yeah, enjoying that, creating a world, and it's quite unique. But anyway, onto the video. It's been a long time since I have posted anything, except for a couple reviews recently for the abysmal show The Rings of Power, but I thought I'd come back and upload my planned video of what is an orc. Thank you to my 349 subscribers. I can't believe it. Nearly 6 years, 5-6 years since I've been active, and the numbers gone up, so I thank you very much. It means a lot, and I hope you continue to like the content. In today's video, I'll be talking about orcs and goblins. More so goblins, as they appear first in history and literature. Orcs come much later in modern fantasy. Orcs always the protagonist, which is quite funny. Not always. Some levels they're not, but mostly they're the bad guys. What is an orc or goblin? Goblins appear throughout history in European folklore. They usually appear as small, mischievous little creatures, often hairy and green, with a twisted, horrid expression on their faces. In fantasy, they almost always are on the side of evil. Within fantasy, orcs are often much larger and humanoid, muscly and tribe-like creatures, basically a larger and more intelligent version of a goblin, but still like a barbarian. History of goblins and orcs. Goblins first appear in European folklore throughout the Middle Ages. They come in many shapes and sizes depending on the location of the story. They are almost always small, mischievous and monstrous. The small green folk terrorise villages and towns, stealing their favourite loot and gold and jewellery. They ambush travellers as greed takes over. My mum, who's from Finland, told me how they are invisible and ride upon the backs of squirrels, hiding in holes within the trees. These are stories I was told when I was younger. Orcs, on the other hand, as we think of them today, originate from Tolkien. However, they are found within mythology, attested as more demon-like and living in the underworld than a rabble of green warriors we know today. Types of orcs and goblins. Within fantasy, orcs and goblins are often depicted as part of the bad side and are the nemesis of the humans or the elves. There are some exceptions. For example, in Elder Scrolls, they are a playable race. In Elder Scrolls, races aren't evil, but the individuals within are. It's the same as the Forbidden Realms or Dungeons and Dragons. In Middle-earth, they are minions of evil. In both Warhammer and Warcraft, they are another race, tribal-like and a horde army, just to be taken as serious as the others. They are almost always green. The orcs are large, strong, and lead the charge, whilst the goblins are smaller and volatile, and often archers of the army. In fiction. For this section, I'll pick out 5 famous fantasy realms where orcs and goblins dwell briefly, speak about each of them. I'll do each one separately. Number 1. Middle-earth. In Tolkien's earlier works, he often described orcs and goblins as the same. However, as his works evolved and more content was written down, the two became quite separate. Goblins are often smaller, crooked creatures that swarm en masse and overrun the enemy, often living in caves and deep within mountains of Middle-earth. For example, Moria, which was once Khazad-dûm. Orcs are a larger variation, often the servants of dark lords and evil leaders. They also live within their own tribes, both having no love for the sunlight. Whilst Tolkien would often consider both the same, the movies and other adaptations made the two quite different, adding a third variant as well called the Uruk-hai, who are often very different in the books compared to the movies. I do love the movie versions though, I must say personally. I think they're amazing. That Battle of Helm's Deep is still the greatest siege battle I've ever seen on TV. Orcs and goblins often wear crude armour and have rusty weapons such as axes, spears or bows, even using poison daggers and arrows. They ride wolves or wargs, swarming enemy formations and cities, killing all in their path. They have hunchbacks and walk like apes, and have very little loyalty and courage, often retreating when defeat is certain. Their origin is very grey. Tolkien had many different variations as to how the orcs came by. My favourite is that of Melkor, not being able to create his own race, so he twisted peoples from the races of men and elves into foul creatures to do his bidding, thus creating the orcs. The original origin comes from elves, but Tolkien did argue later that they came from humans, so we're really unsure. It's very sort of hidden. They have little magic and culture, often eating human flesh and other ghastly things, although they are not loyal and cannot be trusted. Orcs and goblins live to serve. They are too wild to live in any kind of normal community. Notable orcs and goblins: Azog, Bolg, Gorbag, the Great Goblin King, Grishnak, Shagrat, Lurtz, who is my favourite orc, and Uglug. Looks like who's back on the menu, boys. Number 2. Dungeons and Dragons, or Forgotten Realms. Goblins are both small and numerous, often led by larger goblinoid races such as hobgoblins. They are small, agile, and often serve as scouts and infiltrators. The skin colour ranges from yellow to orange to red or even green, each tribe being a different colour. When they aren't playing as scouts or agents, when they commit to battle, they swarm the enemy using their speed and numbers to overwhelm them. Some goblins become heroes and were accepted into the civilized world, not all of them being servants of evil. They are often tribal by nature. They didn't get along with other races and were often suspicious of other goblinoids. They got along almost always with orcs and half-orcs. Their only true ally, however, were the wargs. Orcs, however, are different. They are humanoid and have been a thorn in the side of cultures of Toril, especially Faerun, for a long time. However, after Spell Plague, a horde of mountain orcs, led by King Olbold, Many Arrows, unified into a single kingdom, one that was surprisingly civilized. They vary in appearance depending on the region, but are often greyish in skin, coarse hair, and hunched postures. They have muscular bodies and faces. They have protruding canines that resemble boar tusks. They are often short-tempered and violent, relying on action rather than thinking, thus getting themselves what they desire. Their origin is unknown, however they appear to be non-native to either Abir or Toril, the first stories being that of the wars of their primary god Grumsh and Corellon Laertian, the creator of elves. Grumsh lost an eye and became the one-eyed god of the orcs. For years orcs plagued the civilized lands as raiders and pillaging hordes, the only exception being the modern kingdom of Many Arrows, a civilization that seems more interested in peace than war. Notable orcs and goblins: King Olbold, Jinjin, Choin, Iatana, Grumsh, and Luthik. Number 3. World of Warcraft. Averaging at 4 feet high, goblins are small green humanoids from the Isle of Kazan. They love money, explosives and technology, leaving them often in a neutral standpoint. They were originally slaves of jungle trolls, before the Miners of Kajamite, or generated new cunning and intelligence in the goblin race. It was the mines and slave camps that became their homeworld of Undermine. After they overthrew their masters, cunning and intelligence won the day. Although the effects of Kajamite began to wear off, and their intelligence waned, they still amassed great fortunes, and the Isle of Kazan became a hub for goblin trading ships. By the end of the Third War, the goblins were providing services to both the Horde and the Alliance. However, a tribe of goblins, known as Bilgewater Cartel, became an enemy of the Alliance and joined the Horde. Orcs are not native to Azeroth. They were exiled from their homeworld, Draenor, by the demon lord Kil'jaeden. Once they arrived in Azeroth, the Orc Horde was seemingly unstoppable, and only during a last stand were the humans able to defeat them. A famous orc called Thrall would eventually rise up and lead another invasion of Azeroth. Orcs are between 6 and 8 feet tall, with huge muscular physiques. Males have long and unsular facial hair. Their skin is either brown, ranging from dark to reddish brown, or even grey sometimes, and of course green. Notable orcs and goblins: Jaster Gallywix, Druz, Thrall, Nisanox, Marin Noganafoga, Blackhand, Draka, and Gul'dan. Elder Scrolls. In Elder Scrolls, orcs and goblins differ greatly from other fantasy. Goblins are primitive creatures that live in small clans, whereas the Orcs are more civilized and live among the other races. Goblins are short, around 3 to 5 feet, but tough humanoid creatures who range in colour from green to blue. They live across Tamriel and Akavir in small tribes within caves, sewers, mines and ruins. They are often led by a war chief or a shaman. They often battle all they come across and have been known to live peacefully with orcs. They often use numbers and crude weapons to overwhelm their enemies, while shamans use magic to defend and attack. Orcs are much more sophisticated than the goblins. Their homeworld is Orishinium, also known as Orktown. They were created by the Daedric prince, Berthia. They speak their own language known as Orcish. And live in settlements throughout Tamriel. They consider themselves outcasts, like their god Malakath, which is reflected in their culture. They are still found in the larger settlements, but are often looked down on by the other races. They are often large and muscular, green-skinned, and don heavy orcish armour. They are usually on the front line when fighting for the Empire, but some people even consider them the finest troops, especially when they unleash their berserker rage. Notable orcs: Abzugro Malkal, Garnag, Umbra, General Kamagash, and Bazrag Grofarun. Number 5. Warhammer. In the Old World, Orcs and Goblins are known as the Greenskins. The Greenskins are a primitive and warlike race that dwell within the Badlands of the Old World, much of the Eastern Hemisphere, and pretty much everywhere. The Orcs are large and savage and brutal warriors, whereas the Goblins are smaller, more cunning and conniving creatures. They are often green in colour and live within large tribes. Their love for warfare and brutality always prevented them from ever reaching the heights of the other races due to infighting. They will battle anybody from their own tribes people to the many other races of the Old World, often swarming them with a whole host of weaponry and types of weapons. They ride wolves, giant spiders, and have trolls within their ranks. When there is a war, they call a warg to amass a great army and defeat their enemy. They grow from insidious spores that came to the world via the Old Ones, or drifted through space and eventually ended up in the Old World. These spores spread easily, which make it almost impossible to completely wipe the greenskins out. When one of the greenskins die, their spores are absorbed into the earth, where they grow into full adults. They are governed by strength, and only the strongest can lead them. They will fight for that right. They have no laws, and often partake in trial by combat. Their leader is called a war boss, and can be replaced at any time. They worship Gork and Mork, Gork being like the Orcs, and Mork being like the Goblins. Notable greenskins: Gorbad Ironclaw, Ashag the Slaughterer, Gringor Ironhide, Sharnik, and Wurzag. So there you have it. I hope you found it interesting, and possibly even learned something new. I'll be back to speak as soon as possible about another fantasy race. I'm currently watching The Rings of Power with a group of friends of mine called the Geeks of Power. We're really enjoying chatting to each other and dissecting what an awful show that is. So if you're interested, check those videos out. Leave a like, subscribe and all that stuff. I'm HJ Cronin, and I am signing out. Until next time, goodbye.